Empty horizons. Jackson Reed stepped out of his custom Gulfstream G700 and onto the tarmac of San Francisco International, where investors and reporters waited. At 42, he commanded attention, his steel blue eyes weathered by high altitudes and his posture military straight despite civilian life. As founder and CEO of Meridian Aviation, he'd built an empire of luxury private jets and cutting-edge aerospace technology. Mr. Reed, the Wall Street Journal is calling you the last sky baron. Any comment on your company's record profits? Shouted a reporter. Jackson offered a practiced smile. The sky doesn't care about your bank account. It only respects those who understand its language. He gestured toward his aircraft. And Meridian speaks that language fluently. His assistant Tanner navigated him through the crowd toward a waiting car. The board is impressed with the quarter's numbers. The new sustainable fuel initiative has investors buzzing. Good, Jackson replied, scrolling through emails on his phone. Schedule the Beijing meeting for next week. I'll pilot myself. Sir, about the charity gala tonight, send my regrets. I'll double my donation instead. The car slipped into traffic as Jackson gazed at San Francisco Bay. His penthouse overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge was just one of 7 properties he owned. Globally, all impeccably designed, all essentially empty. Just how he preferred things. His thoughts drifted to Olivia Bennett, a memory he usually kept locked away. 8 years ago, she'd been a flight paramedic with search and rescue when they met during a mountain evacuation initiative. Her intelligence and fearlessness in emergency situations had captivated him. For nearly a year, they shared a passion that surprised him with its intensity, until she began talking about permanence. About family? I can't be the person you need, he'd told her on that final night, standing in the rain outside her modest coastal home. My life doesn't have room for that kind of commitment. That's not how love works, Jackson, she'd replied, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. It's not about making room. It's about building something new together. I don't need a family, he'd said, the words coming out harsher than intended. This life, the freedom to go anywhere, answer to no one, it's everything to me. He'd walked away that night, eventually erasing her number but never quite the memory of her face. 3 weeks later, Jackson found himself piloting his personal Cirrus SR-22 along the California coastline, a rare moment of recreational flying. The weather report had mentioned possible coastal fog, but nothing concerning to a pilot of his experience. Halfway through the flight, however, the engine began running rough, gauges flickering ominously. Meridian 390 experiencing engine trouble, he radioed, scanning the terrain below. Requesting emergency landing coordinates. Roger that, Meridian. Divert to Seacliff Municipal, heading 040, 12 miles. Jackson banked the aircraft, fighting increasingly sluggish controls as he descended toward a small airfield nestled against dramatic coastal cliffs. He executed a textbook emergency landing on a runway barely adequate for his aircraft. The small airport seemed almost deserted except for a maintenance hangar where a few mechanics worked. Jackson stepped out, inspecting his plane with growing frustration. You put her down real nice, mister, came a small voice. Jackson turned to find a girl of about 7 standing nearby, clutching a well-worn logbook. She wore jeans and a navy blue jacket with aviation patches sewn haphazardly across it. Her dark hair was pulled into uneven pigtails, and her eyes, bright and curious, studied him with unfiltered interest. That was an emergency descent approach, wasn't it? She continued. I could tell by your angle. My mom says that's the trickiest kind. Your mom knows about flying? Jackson asked, oddly unsettled by the child's confident assessment. She's the best, the girl nodded emphatically. I'm Penny, by the way. I'm going to be a pilot someday. Who are you? Before Jackson could answer, a mechanic approached. Mr. Reed? I've checked your engine. Fuel injector problem. We'll need parts from the mainland. Won't have them until tomorrow at the earliest. Jackson swore under his breath, then remembered the child. Sorry, is there a hotel nearby? Penny giggled. There's only one inn in Seacliff, and it's tiny. But it's nice. My mom can help you. She helps everybody. As Jackson considered his limited options in this unexpected detour, he heard footsteps approaching from behind. Something in the rhythm made his heart rate accelerate before his mind could process why. "Penny, honey, I told you not to bother the pilots," came a voice he'd recognize anywhere. Jackson turned slowly, time seeming to stretch as he faced the woman he'd walked away from 8 years ago. Olivia stood before him, her copper hair shorter now, her face more angular but still striking. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by visible shock. "Jackson," she whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for her daughter's shoulder. Her daughter, the girl with curious eyes who knew about emergency descent angles. "The math wasn't difficult, Olivia," he managed, as the ground seemed to shift beneath him like turbulence he couldn't control. "It's been a while." Unexpected turbulence. The Seacliff Inn overlooked the harbor, a Victorian structure painted pale blue against the darkening sky. Jackson sat at the window of his room, phone in hand, canceling meetings and rearranging his schedule. But his mind remained fixed on the girl with the logbook, Penny. He calculated again. 8 years since he'd left Olivia. A child of 7. The timing aligned perfectly, leaving no room for doubt. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, Olivia stood in the hallway, tension visible in her shoulders. "We need to talk," she said simply. They walked to a small garden behind the inn. Fall flowers swayed in the coastal breeze as awkward silence stretched between them. "Is she mine?" Jackson finally asked, though he already knew. Olivia looked out toward the ocean. "Yes, Penelope Reed Bennett." "She goes by Penny. Why didn't you tell me?" "You made your position very clear, Jackson. I don't need a family. Those were your exact words." Olivia's voice remained steady, years of practiced composure evident. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after you left. I called your office. Your assistant said you were in Dubai and wouldn't take personal calls," Jackson remembered. He'd instructed Tanner to screen all calls from Olivia, believing a clean break was kinder than prolonging the inevitable. "I wrote letters," she continued. "They came back unopened. After the 3rd attempt, I understood you meant what you said. So you decided I didn't deserve to know I had a daughter?" Anger flashed through him. At her for keeping this secret, at himself for creating the circumstances. Olivia's eyes narrowed. "This isn't about what you deserve, Jackson. It's about what Penny deserves. A father who wants to be in her life, not one who sees her as an inconvenience to his freedom. You had no right to make that decision. I had every right as her mother to protect her from rejection." Olivia softened slightly. "Penny knows about you, or a version of you. I told her her father is a pilot who flies important people around the world, that he's very busy. I never said you abandoned us or that you didn't want her." Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "What does she think happened between us? That we loved each other but wanted different lives. It's the truth, simplified for a child." They fell silent, watching the waves crash against the cliffs below. "She's extraordinary," Jackson admitted. "The way she talked about flying." A small smile crossed Olivia's face. "She's obsessed with aviation. Reads everything she can find. Saves her allowance for flight simulator time at the community center." She hesitated. "She has your analytical mind. And your stubbornness." "What happens now?" Jackson asked. "That depends. Your plane will be fixed tomorrow. You could fly away again and nothing changes, or you could stay a few days. Get to know her." Olivia met his gaze directly. "But Jackson, if you start this, you can't just disappear when it gets difficult. She's not a business deal you can walk away from." Before he could respond, his phone rang, his executive team with an urgent matter. Olivia nodded understanding and turned to leave. "I'm staying at the Blue Cottage past the marina," she said. "Penny would like to show you her airplane collection. Tomorrow at 4, if you're interested." After she left, Jackson paced the small room, feeling the walls of his carefully constructed life beginning to crack. In the morning, he called Tanner. "Cancel everything for the next week," he instructed. "Family emergency." It was the first time in his life he'd ever used those words. The following afternoon, Jackson approached the Blue Cottage, a gift-wrapped package under his arm. Penny opened the door before he could knock, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mom said you might come. Did you bring your logbook? Can I see your pilot's license? Do you fly jets or just props?" Her rapid-fire questions continued as she pulled him inside to a living room where model aircraft hung from the ceiling and aviation books filled the shelves. On one wall hung a framed photo of Olivia in her flight paramedic uniform, standing beside a rescue helicopter. "This is my collection," Penny announced proudly, pointing to a display case of model aircraft. "I organized them by era and type. The warbirds are my favorite." Jackson felt something unfamiliar expanding in his chest as he watched her enthusiastically explain each model. This child, his child, spoke the language of aviation with a passion that mirrored his own at that age. "I brought you something," he said, offering the package. Penny carefully unwrapped it to reveal a professional-grade flight simulator control yoke. Her eyes widened. "This is the TX-4000. It's the one real pilots train on." She looked up at him in awe. "How did you know?" From the kitchen doorway, Olivia watched with cautious eyes. "Your mom mentioned you save for simulator time," Jackson explained. "Can we set it up now, please?" For the next hour, Jackson helped install the simulator, explaining technical details while Penny absorbed every word. When they finished, she climbed into her desk chair, gripped the yoke with determination, and performed a takeoff sequence that impressed even him. "You've practiced this before," he observed. "Every Saturday at the community center. I have the highest scores," she said without pride, simply stating a fact. "Mom says I'm a natural, just like—" She stopped, suddenly shy. "Just like who?" Jackson prompted. Penny glanced toward the kitchen where Olivia was preparing dinner. "Just like my dad," she whispered. "Mom says flying is in my blood." Jackson felt the ground shift beneath him again. Not with panic this time, but with something more complex. He'd spent years building an empire in the sky, believing family would only hold him back. Now he found himself face to face with a continuation of himself he'd never imagined possible. As he prepared to leave that evening, Penny asked hesitantly, "Will you come back tomorrow? There's an air show at the municipal field. Nothing fancy like your jet, but—" "I'll be there," Jackson promised before he could stop himself. Walking back to the inn under a sky full of stars, Jackson realized he'd made his first commitment to someone other than himself in nearly a decade. The thought terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. Navigation points. The Seacliff Air Show was modest by international standards, a collection of vintage aircraft, aerobatic performers, and local pilots showing off their skills. To Penny, however, it was magnificent. She bounced alongside Jackson, rattling off facts about each aircraft they passed. "That's a restored Stearman PT-17, she explained, pointing to a yellow biplane. "They used them as trainers in World War II, and over there is a Piper Cub. It can take off in super short distances. One time, a pilot landed one on top of a moving train." Jackson found himself smiling at her enthusiasm. "Have you ever flown in a small aircraft?" Penny's face fell slightly. "Not yet. Mom says when I'm 10, I can take an intro flight with an instructor." "That's only 3 years away," Jackson offered. 3 years is forever," she sighed dramatically. Nearby, Olivia chatted with an older pilot beside a restored Cessna 180. She'd been surprised when Jackson appeared at their door that morning, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual tailored suits. Now, watching him with Penny, she noticed how he knelt to her level when explaining technical details, his usual impatience nowhere in evidence. It was a side of Jackson she'd glimpsed during their brief time together, a gentleness he rarely showed the world. "Your daughter's a regular aviation encyclopedia," remarked Greta Fleming, the town's mail carrier and local flight instructor. "Takes after her mama." "And her father," Olivia admitted quietly. "He's very much in her DNA." Greta followed her gaze to Jackson and Penny. "So that's him? The hotshot who flew away? Seems different than you described." "He is different," Olivia said, realizing it was true. The Jackson she'd known would have been checking his phone constantly, making deals between conversations. This Jackson was fully present, focused entirely on his daughter. Later, as the show's announcer invited children for airplane rides, Penny looked longingly at the small Cessna offering short flights around the bay. "Can I go? Please?" she begged Olivia. Before Olivia could respond, Jackson intervened. "I could take her up," he offered. In my Cirrus. It's perfectly safe. I had the mechanics do a complete check after the repairs. Olivia hesitated, torn between caution and her daughter's pleading expression. I trust him with the flying part, she finally told Penny. You can go. Minutes later, Jackson helped Penny into the co-pilot seat of his Cirrus, carefully adjusting her headset. This button is the push to talk, he explained. When you want to speak over the radio, press it first. Penny nodded seriously, taking in every detail. As they taxied down the runway, Jackson glanced at her. Nervous? No way, she grinned. I was born for this. The Cirrus lifted smoothly into the afternoon sky, banking gently over Seacliff's harbor and lighthouse. Penny's face was transformed with wonder as she watched the landscape unfold beneath them. The dramatic coastline, rolling hills, and the town itself reduced to a charming miniature. It's even better than I imagined, she breathed. Jackson guided the plane along the coast, pointing out landmarks. When they reached a stretch of open water, he asked, Want to try? Penny's eyes widened. Really? Just straight and level. Keep the horizon right there on the instrument panel. With intense concentration, Penny placed her hands on the controls as Jackson coached her through gentle adjustments. For several minutes, she flew the aircraft, her face a study in focused joy. My friends at school won't believe this, she said. I'm actually flying a plane. You're a natural, Jackson told her, surprised by the pride in his voice. As they circled back toward the airfield, Penny grew quiet. Finally, she asked the question he'd been dreading. Are you really my dad? The aircraft seemed to hang suspended in the moment, the engine's hum the only sound between them. Jackson had prepared explanations, justifications for his absence, but they evaporated in the face of her direct question. Yes, he answered simply. I am. Penny nodded, processing this confirmation of what she'd already suspected. Mom said you build airplanes and fly important people around. That's why you couldn't be with us. Jackson felt the familiar urge to accept this convenient explanation, to hide behind the excuse of his work. Instead, he found himself speaking a truth he'd never acknowledged aloud. I wasn't ready to be a father, he said. I was afraid I wouldn't be good at it. That I'd disappoint you? Are you still afraid? She asked. Jackson looked at his daughter, this remarkable child he'd had no part in raising, and felt something fundamental shift within him. Yes, he admitted. But I'm learning that some things are worth being afraid for. After they landed, Olivia was waiting on the tarmac, relief visible on her face as Penny ran toward her, bubbling with excitement about their flight. That evening, Jackson joined them for dinner at the cottage. As Penny recounted every detail of their flight for the third time, Olivia caught Jackson's eye over their daughter's head. Thank you, she mouthed silently. Later, after Penny had gone to bed, they sat on the porch watching moonlight play across the water. She asked if I was her father, Jackson said. While we were flying, Olivia tensed. What did you tell her? The truth. That I am, and that I wasn't ready before. He turned to face her. But I'd like to try now, Olivia. I'd like to be part of her life. And what happens when you get bored with playing dad? When your real life calls you back to boardrooms and international deals? I don't know, he admitted. I can't promise I'll be good at this, but I want to try. Olivia studied his face in the dim light. This isn't just about weekend visits and Christmas presents, Jackson. Being a parent is showing up every day, even when it's inconvenient. I understand. Do you? Because Penny's already lost you once, even if she didn't know it. I won't let her go through that pain when you realize family life isn't as exciting as your world of private jets and billion-dollar deals. Jackson absorbed her words, feeling their weight. I've achieved everything I thought I wanted, he said quietly. Built an empire from nothing, and yet sitting in a cockpit today, watching our daughter fly for the first time. That felt more significant than any business success. One meaningful moment doesn't make you a father. No, he agreed. But it's where I'd like to start. As he walked back to the inn that night, Jackson's phone buzzed with messages from his executive team, urgent matters requiring his attention. For the first time in his career, he switched off the device without responding. The decisions waiting for him were far more important than any corporate crisis. Weather systems. 3 days later, Jackson stood in Seacliff's small airport office, examining weather radar with growing concern. A powerful storm system was moving up the coast faster than initially predicted. The barometric pressure was dropping rapidly, and wind speeds had already grounded all local aircraft. "We should close the causeway," he told Harbor Master Theo Delgado. "Those gusts will make it impassable within hours." Theo frowned at the radar. "The county emergency management won't authorize closure until conditions deteriorate further. Protocol. Protocol won't matter when someone gets blown off into the bay," Jackson argued. The door burst open as Olivia rushed in, rain-soaked and breathless. In her paramedic uniform, she looked exactly as she had when Jackson first met her years ago, capable and determined. "We've got trouble," she announced. The fishing vessel Northern Star lost power 6 miles offshore. 4 crew members aboard. Coast Guards diverted to a capsized boat near the Channel Islands. "Harbor Patrol?" Theo asked. "Their rescue boat's engine failed last week. Replacement parts haven't arrived." Olivia ran a hand through her wet hair. "The harbor master at Westport is sending help, but in these conditions, they're 2 hours out minimum." Jackson studied the radar again. "The Northern Star will be on the rocks before then." "What about the old helicopter?" "The Bell 47 at the municipal field?" Olivia shook her head. "Greta's our only certified rescue pilot, and she's stranded in Sacramento. Weather grounded her there this morning." A heavy silence filled the room as they all recognized the implications. "The Northern Star's crew faced almost certain death without immediate assistance." "I can fly it," Jackson said quietly. Olivia stared at him. "That's a specialized rescue aircraft. You're not trained?" "I've logged over 15,000 flight hours, including difficult extractions in the Hindu Kush, for a private security contractor." Jackson held her gaze. "You're qualified for the medical evacuation. We could reach them in 20 minutes. "It's too dangerous," Theo protested. "Those winds would challenge even Greta." "We don't have a choice," Jackson said. "And we're running out of time." 15 minutes later, Jackson completed pre-flight checks on the old Bell 47, its bubble cockpit offering excellent visibility but little protection from the elements. Beside him, Olivia secured medical equipment while glancing anxiously at her phone. "Mrs. Winters will stay with Penny until we're back," she shouted over the rotor noise. "I told her we'd return before dinner." Jackson nodded, feeling the weight of this promise as he eased the helicopter into the howling wind. The aircraft bucked violently, fighting his control inputs as rain lashed against the plexiglass. He'd flown in dangerous conditions before, but never with so much personally at stake. For 20 harrowing minutes, they battled crosswinds and downdrafts, the helicopter shuddering with each gust. Through sheets of rain, they finally spotted the Northern Star, listing dangerously as waves crashed across its deck. "They're taking on water," Olivia reported, binoculars pressed to her eyes. "We need to move fast." Jackson brought the helicopter into a hover 30 feet above the vessel, a nearly impossible feat in the violent air currents. As Olivia prepared the rescue harness, a massive wave slammed into the fishing boat, rolling it precariously. "2 crew members in the water," she shouted. Without hesitation, Olivia secured herself to the rescue line and descended into the churning sea, fighting through waves to reach the first fisherman. Jackson maintained position despite wind gusts threatening to slam them into the vessel's mast. Through the rain-streaked window, he watched Olivia secure the semi-conscious man to the harness and signal for extraction. One by one, they rescued the crew, Olivia braving the treacherous waters while Jackson held the helicopter steady against impossible odds. The final extraction came just as the Northern Star slipped beneath the waves, leaving only debris floating on the surface. With all 4 fishermen secured, Jackson turned toward shore, fighting fatigue and deteriorating visibility. The helicopter's fuel gauge dipped toward reserve as they finally glimpsed Seacliff's lighthouse through the storm. "We're not going to make the airfield," he announced grimly, preparing for beach landing. He brought the helicopter down on a narrow strip of sand, rotors slowing as the final drops of fuel fed the engines. Emergency vehicles converged on their position as medical teams rushed to assist the injured fishermen. Olivia worked alongside local EMTs, directing treatment with calm efficiency. When the last patient had been stabilized and transported, She collapsed onto the sand beside Jackson, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "We did it," she said simply. "You were incredible out there," he told her, genuine admiration in his voice. "I've never seen anyone so fearless." Not fearless. Terrified, actually. She managed a tired smile. But sometimes the most important things require facing fear. They made their way back to the cottage, soaked and exhausted, to find Penny wide awake despite the late hour. When she saw them at the door, she launched herself into their arms. "Everyone at school is talking about the rescue," she exclaimed. "They said you saved all those people from the sinking boat?" Olivia kissed the top of her head. "Time for bed, sweetheart. We'll tell you all about it tomorrow." After tucking Penny in, they sat in the kitchen, hands wrapped around mugs of tea, the adrenaline of the rescue gradually fading. "You could have died today," Olivia said quietly. "So could you," Jackson countered. "Yet you didn't hesitate." "That's my job. It's more than that." Jackson studied her face, seeing beyond her exhaustion to the core of determination that had first drawn him to her. "You do it because it matters. Because other people matter." "And what matters to you, Jackson? Beyond building your empire?" The question hung between them, demanding an honesty he'd avoided for years. "For the longest time, I thought success was measured by what you could achieve alone." He stared into his mug. "My father left when I was 9. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I promised myself I'd never depend on anyone, never be vulnerable to that kind of abandonment again." "So you became the one who leaves first," Olivia observed, without judgment. "Yes." The admission felt like releasing a burden he'd carried for decades. But today, watching you risk everything for strangers, seeing how this entire town came together during the crisis, I realized what I've been missing. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small cottage, something long dormant began to take root. Not the passionate romance they'd shared years ago, but something potentially more enduring: understanding, respect, and the recognition of shared purpose. As Jackson prepared to leave for the inn, his phone rang. It was Tanner, his voice urgent. "Sir, the board is convening an emergency meeting. Your absence during this acquisition has raised concerns. They're suggesting a vote of no confidence if you don't return immediately." 8 years ago, Jackson would have been on the next flight out. Tonight, looking back at the cottage where his daughter slept, he made a different choice. "Tell them I'll join by video conference tomorrow. Family emergency." This time, the words felt entirely true. Home landing. The Meridian Aviation corporate headquarters dominated the San Francisco skyline, 60 stories of glass and steel reflecting the bay's waters. In the executive boardroom, tension hung palpably as Jackson faced 12 stern faces on the video screen from his hotel room in Seacliff. "Your unexplained absence has jeopardized the Singapore acquisition," said Eleanor Westfield, head of the board. "The Chung Group is threatening to walk unless you personally oversee the final negotiations." Jackson adjusted his tie, the only formal clothing he'd packed for what was supposed to be a brief stopover. "The acquisition terms were established weeks ago. Our legal team is more than capable." "They want you, Jackson," interrupted Richard Harmon, a major investor. "Your reputation is what secured this deal in the first place. This disappearing act undermines everything we've built." "I had a family emergency," Jackson stated firmly. Disbelieving glances passed between board members. In 15 years, Jackson Reed had never mentioned family. His dedication to Meridian was legendary precisely because nothing competed for his attention. "This emergency," Eleanor said carefully, "is it resolved?" Jackson looked out the window toward the harbor where he knew Penny would be finishing her school day. "No," he answered honestly. "In fact, it's just beginning." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Jackson, we've supported your methods because they've delivered results. But the board cannot accept an absent CEO during this critical phase. Return to headquarters by tomorrow morning, or we'll be forced to consider interim leadership options." After the call ended, Jackson sat motionless, contemplating choices he'd never imagined facing. His company, the entity he'd built from nothing, pouring every ounce of his energy and intellect into its creation, now demanded a decision that would define the rest of his life. His phone chimed with a message from Olivia. "Penny's school play starts at 7. She's hoping you'll be there." A school play versus a billion-dollar acquisition. In his previous life, there would have been no question which took priority. Now, staring at Olivia's message, Jackson felt certainty crystallizing within him. He made 3 calls, the first to his chief legal counsel outlining specific instructions, the second to his financial advisor, initiating protocols they'd discussed but never implemented, the third to Tanner containing only 2 words, Plan B. That evening, Jackson sat in the elementary school auditorium as Penny performed in Amelia Earhart's Sky Pioneer. Wearing a leather flight cap and goggles too large for her face, she delivered her lines with conviction. The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. From the corner of his eye, Jackson noticed Olivia watching him rather than their daughter, perhaps wondering if he recognized Earhart's words as a message meant for him. After the performance, Penny rushed to them, still in costume. "Did you see when I flew across the Atlantic?" she asked excitedly. "Mrs. Patterson said my navigation calculations were exactly right." "You were amazing," Jackson told her, surprised by the emotion tightening his throat. "Amelia herself would have been impressed." Penny beamed, then grew serious. "Mom said you might have to leave soon, to go back to your company." Jackson glanced at Olivia, who shrugged apologetically. "I didn't want her blindsided," she explained quietly. Kneeling to Penny's level, Jackson chose his words carefully. "I do have some important things to take care of. But I'm not disappearing, Penny, not this time. Promise?" she asked, her vulnerability unmistakable. "I promise," he said, the weight of this commitment settling into his bones. "In fact, I was wondering if you and your mom might visit me in San Francisco soon. I have a private airfield there with some interesting planes you might like to see." Penny's eyes widened. "Really, Mom, can we?" Olivia's expression remained guarded. "We'll see, honey. Go get changed now. We'll wait right here." When Penny had bounded off, Olivia turned to Jackson. "Don't make promises you can't keep. She's already talking about having a father. If this is temporary, it's not," Jackson interrupted. "I've made my decision." "What decision?" "I'm stepping down as CEO of Meridian." Olivia stared at him in shock. "Your company is your life." "It was," he corrected. "I've asked the board to appoint my CFO as interim CEO while I transition to chairman. I'll still have input on major decisions, but no day-to-day operations." "You'd give that up? The control, the prestige?" Jackson smiled ruefully. "I thought having complete control meant freedom. But these past 2 weeks have shown me it was actually a prison of my own making." He hesitated. "I've made an offer on the property next to the lighthouse. The one with the small private hangar." "You're moving to Seacliff?" Disbelief colored her voice. "Not full-time, at least not immediately. But I want to be close enough to be present in Penny's life, to coach her flight simulator team, to be at her school plays." He met Olivia's gaze directly. "I know I can't undo the past 8 years. I know I have no right to expect anything from you. This isn't about us. It's about being the father Penny deserves." Olivia studied him, searching for signs of the man who'd walked away years ago. "And when this small-town novelty wears off? When you miss the excitement of running a global corporation? I'll still have challenges. I'm establishing a foundation to provide flight training scholarships for underprivileged youth, and there's a medical evacuation service that could use upgrading in this region." He smiled slightly. "I'm not retiring, Olivia. Just redirecting my focus to things that matter more than quarterly profits." Penny returned, flight cap still perched on her head despite having changed back into regular clothes. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate my performance?" "Absolutely," Jackson agreed. "I think successful transatlantic flights definitely warrant ice cream." As they walked toward the harbor's small ice cream parlor, Penny reached up and took Jackson's hand naturally, as if she'd been doing it her entire life. On her other side, she held Olivia's hand, creating a connection between the 3 of them that transcended the years of separation. Later that night, after Penny had gone to bed, Jackson and Olivia stood on the cottage porch, the storm from days earlier replaced by clear skies filled with stars. "You really meant it," Olivia said wonderingly. "About staying?" "I meant all of it." Jackson turned to face her. I spent years believing I didn't need anyone, that independence was strength and attachment was weakness. I was wrong. What changed your mind? Penny, obviously, but also you. He gestured toward the harbor where the town's lights twinkled. This community, watching how people here depend on each other, support each other through storms both literal and figurative. I realized true strength isn't standing alone, it's being part of something larger than yourself. Olivia smiled slightly. That's quite an evolution for someone who once told me family would clip your wings. I was thinking about that during Penny's play, Jackson admitted. Earhart didn't fly across the Atlantic alone, you know. She had navigators, engineers, weather experts, an entire team making her journey possible. I've been so focused on solo achievement that I missed the point entirely. They fell silent, the possibility of a shared future hanging unspoken between them. I'm not asking for things to return to how they were between us, Jackson finally said. Too much has happened, but I'd like the chance to prove that I can be consistent. That I can be present for Penny, and a friend to you, if you'll allow it. Olivia nodded slowly. One day at a time. The following morning, Jackson walked with Penny along the airfield runway, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. She skipped beside him, full of questions about the planes they would explore in San Francisco. Will I get to see your company? The one that builds jets? Absolutely, he promised. Though it may not be my company much longer, at least not in the same way. Penny stopped, looking up at him with sudden concern. Because of me? Because you had to stay here when your plane broke? Jackson knelt before her. Because of what you helped me understand. There are different kinds of flying, Penny. For years, I thought success meant soaring as high and fast as possible, all by myself. He pointed to a formation of geese crossing the morning sky. But look at them. They fly farther together than any could alone. They take turns leading and supporting each other. Penny considered this. So you're not giving up flying? Never. But I'm changing how and why I fly. He smiled at his daughter, the words still new and wondrous in his mind. And who I fly with. Penny slipped her small hand into his larger one. I like that better. From across the airfield, Olivia watched them walking together, silhouetted against the sunrise. 8 years ago, she'd watched Jackson Reed disappear into the clouds, certain he would never return. Now, against all expectations, he had not only returned but chosen to land, to build something more meaningful than the empire he'd created in the sky. The journey ahead would not be without turbulence. Trust once broken required time to rebuild. But as she watched Jackson pointing out aircraft features to their enthusiastic daughter, Olivia felt hope taking flight within her, not the passionate, consuming hope of their earlier relationship, but something steadier and more enduring. Sometimes, she reflected, the most important journeys weren't about how high you could fly alone, but about finding your way home, and recognizing home not as a place that confined you, but as the people who gave your journey meaning. In the distance, Jackson and Penny had stopped to watch a small plane taking off. Their faces lifted skyward in identical expressions of wonder. Different generations of the same dream, now connected by something stronger than DNA, a shared love of the infinite sky and the promise of new horizons. This time, Olivia knew, Jackson Reed would not disappear into those horizons. This time, he had found something worth staying for.